The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a desperate scream. Admiral Zexthera of the Galactic Coalition fleet pressed her four-fingered hand against the holographic display, watching the pulsing red dot that marked the origin of the distress signal. Her purple-scaled face showed the exhaustion that came from 3 cycles of constant warfare against the Void Reapers, a mechanical plague that had swept through 12 star systems, leaving nothing but empty husks of planets in their wake. "Admiral," came the voice of her tactical officer, Lieutenant Crindole, his insectoid compound eyes reflecting the bridge's amber lighting. "The signal is coming from the Terran system. Coalition records show it as a restricted zone." Zexthera's tail swished with irritation. The Terran system had been marked off limits for nearly 200 cycles, ever since the Great Survey had classified it as containing primitive life forms. The Coalition's prime directive forbade contact with species that hadn't achieved faster than light travel. But the emergency beacon was using Coalition frequencies, which meant someone authorized was already there. "What's our estimated arrival time?" she asked, studying the tactical readouts that showed their fleet's current position. 18 cycles at maximum warp, Admiral. "But our ships are running on emergency power reserves. We've been fighting for too long without proper resupply." The Admiral looked at her fleet status. 7 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and her flagship remained from what had once been the Coalition's proudest armada. Each vessel bore the scars of countless battles against the Void Reapers' relentless advance. Energy shields flickered weakly, hull plating showed the telltale burn marks of plasma weapons, and crew morale had reached dangerously low levels. "Set course for the Terran system," she ordered. "And someone find out what Coalition forces are doing in a restricted zone." The journey took longer than expected. 2 of their cruisers suffered engine failures that required field repairs in open space. The crew worked tirelessly, their various species united by the common threat they'd been fleeing from. Zexthera watched through her viewport as engineers in environmental suits welded hull breaches, their work lights creating brief stars in the darkness. As they approached the edge of the Terran system, the source of the beacon became clear. A single Coalition science vessel, the C&V Pathfinder, hung in space near the system's 4th planet. But something was wrong. The ship's hull showed massive damage, and it was barely maintaining orbit. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Pathfinder," reported Communications Officer Velterra, her tentacles dancing across the control interface. "Put it through." A holographic display shimmered, revealing the battered face of Captain Mordak, a veteran hegemony officer whose blue-gray skin showed the stress of recent combat. Behind him, Zexthera could see smoke and sparks from damaged equipment. "Admiral Zexthera, thank the ancestors you received our beacon. We're in desperate need of assistance. Captain Mordak, explain your presence in this restricted system." The captain's expression grew grim. "We were conducting a routine deep space survey when the Void Reapers found us. 3 of their harvester ships pursued us into this system. We managed to damage 2 of them, but our ship is crippled. The 3rd harvester is still operational and hunting us." Zexthera felt her blood chill. The Void Reapers had found them even here, in this remote corner of the galaxy. Their mechanical ships stripped planets of all organic matter, converting it into fuel for their endless expansion. No Coalition force had ever successfully stopped them, only slowed their advance. "Where is the remaining harvester now?" "Unknown, Admiral. It disappeared behind the 3rd planet 6 cycles ago. We've detected massive energy readings from that direction, but our sensors are too damaged to get clear readings." The Admiral studied the system's layout on her tactical display. The 3rd planet from the star appeared to be within the habitable zone, showing signs of abundant water and a thick atmosphere. According to the restricted files, this was where the primitive life forms had been detected. "Admiral," interrupted Lieutenant Crindole, his compound eyes focusing on his instrument panel. "I'm detecting multiple warp signatures approaching our position. Void Reaper configuration." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of damaged equipment. Zexthera checked their fleet status again. With their current damage and low energy reserves, they might be able to defeat 1 harvester, but if more were coming, they would share the fate of every other Coalition force that had faced the Reapers. "How many signatures?" she asked quietly. 12, Admiral. Full harvester fleet configuration." The impossible had become certain doom. 12 Void Reaper harvesters could strip a star system clean in days. The Coalition had never faced more than 5 at once, and those encounters had always ended in complete defeat. Options, she asked her senior staff, though she already knew the answer. We could attempt to evacuate the Pathfinder's crew and make a strategic withdrawal, suggested Commander Raxith, her security chief. To where? Zexthara asked. They'll follow us wherever we go. And there are no coalition reinforcements within 50 cycles of travel. The harsh reality settled over the bridge crew. They were alone, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never shown mercy or negotiation. The Void Reapers existed only to consume, to strip every world clean of life and convert it to fuel their expansion. Admiral called Velterra from the communications station. I'm receiving strange signals from the third planet. Multiple sources, very primitive technology, but the volume is enormous. Elaborate. It appears to be some form of electromagnetic communication network covering the entire planet's surface. Radio waves, data streams, what looks like entertainment broadcasts. The primitive life forms appear to have developed a global communication system. This was puzzling. The Great Survey had indicated pre-industrial development levels. How had they advanced so quickly? But, more importantly, a planet full of primitive life forms was about to become another harvest site for the Void Reapers. Admiral, Lieutenant Crindole's voice carried a note of alarm. The Void Reaper fleet has entered the system. They're heading directly for the third planet. Zexthara watched the tactical display as 12 massive ships, each the size of a coalition battlecruiser, moved through the system with mechanical precision. Their hulls were a mixture of stolen technology from dozens of conquered worlds, giving them an patchwork appearance that somehow made them more terrifying. They know there's life there, she realized. They can detect the electromagnetic emissions just like we can. The moral implications hit her immediately. By leading the Void Reapers to this system, they had doomed an entire world of primitive beings. The Coalition's prime directive meant nothing to creatures that would be dead within cycles. Admiral, what are your orders? Asked Commander Raxith. Zexthara stared at the display, watching the Reaper fleet's inexorable advance toward the third planet. Her damaged fleet couldn't stop 12 harvesters, but perhaps they could delay them long enough for the planet's inhabitants to, what? They were primitive. They had no starships, no energy weapons, no way to defend themselves against technology that had conquered half the galaxy. Signal the fleet, she said finally. We're going to make a stand. Admiral? Raxith's tone suggested he thought she'd lost her mind. We can't save that planet, but we can make the Reapers pay for it. Maybe buy some time for the inhabitants too. I don't know. Hide. Pray. Something. Ma'am, with respect, they're primitives. They probably don't even know what's coming. Zexthara's jaw tightened. Every sentient being deserves the chance to die fighting instead of being harvested like grain. Signal the fleet. Battle formation. The Coalition ships moved into their standard attack formation, damaged hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. Their energy weapons charged with what little power remained, and their few remaining missiles were loaded into launch tubes. It would be a futile gesture, but it would be their gesture. As they prepared for what would likely be their final battle, the long-range sensors detected something unexpected from the third planet. The electromagnetic chatter from the surface was increasing exponentially, and strange energy signatures were appearing across the planet's surface. Admiral, Velterra called out, her voice puzzled. I'm detecting massive coordinated movement on the planet's surface. It's like the entire population is mobilizing for something. They probably detected the Reaper ships, Zexthara replied. Mass panic is a common response. But, as the sensor readings continued to pour in, it became clear that whatever was happening on the planet's surface was far more organized than panic. The energy signatures were forming distinct patterns, moving with purpose across continents and oceans. Admiral, you need to see this, Lieutenant Crindole said, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. The Void Reapers have entered the planet's orbital space, but something is happening down there. The main display shifted to show the third planet in detail. What they saw defied everything they knew about primitive civilizations. The entire surface appeared to be awakening, as if the planet itself was preparing for war. Lights blazed across the dark side of the world in patterns too complex to be accidental, and the electromagnetic emissions had organized into what could only be described as a planet-wide communication network. Admiral, Velterra's voice was barely a whisper. I think we may have underestimated these primitives. As if in response to her words, the first Void Reaper harvester began its descent toward the planet's surface, ready to begin the systematic extermination of another world. But, this time, something was different. This time, the planet seemed to be waiting for them. And, deep in her core, Admiral Zexthera felt something she hadn't experienced in cycles of hopeless warfare against the Void Reapers. She felt hope. Not for victory, but for the possibility that this time, just this once, the monsters might face something they weren't prepared for. The war for Earth was about to begin, and neither side fully understood what they were about to unleash. Colonel Sarah Chen had been in the middle of her morning briefing at NORAD when every screen in the command center simultaneously exploded with incoming data. Satellite feeds, radio telescopes, and deep space monitoring stations all confirmed the same impossible reality: 12 massive alien vessels had entered Earth's solar system and were heading directly for their planet. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Morrison from his station, his voice cracking slightly. "We're also detecting what appears to be a damaged alien vessel near Mars, and several smaller ships in defensive formation." Sarah studied the displays, her military training keeping her calm despite the magnitude of what she was seeing. The larger vessels showed signs of advanced technology far beyond anything Earth possessed, while the smaller group appeared to be damaged and outnumbered. "Get me the president," she ordered. "And patch me through to every military command on the planet. We're looking at first contact, and it doesn't look friendly." Within minutes, the secure communication network was buzzing with activity as world leaders, military commanders, and scientists tried to process the unprecedented situation. The larger alien ships were massive, each one approximately the size of a city, while the smaller group consisted of vessels that looked more like traditional spacecraft. Dr. Elena Vasquez, SETI's lead xenobiologist, had been rushed to NORAD as soon as the signals were detected. She studied the electromagnetic signatures coming from the alien vessels with growing concern. "Colonel Chen," she said, looking up from her analysis. "The larger ships are emitting some kind of scanning beams toward Earth. It's like they're cataloging our planet's resources." "And the smaller group?" "They appear to be trying to intercept the larger ships, but they're vastly outgunned. If I had to guess, I'd say we're looking at two different alien factions, and the smaller group might be trying to protect us." Sarah felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. Every decision made in the next few hours could determine the fate of humanity. "What's our response capability?" General Harrison, who had arrived from the Pentagon, shook his head grimly. "Against technology like that? Our most advanced weapons are essentially throwing rocks. But we're not going down without a fight." Across the globe, military bases erupted into activity. Fighter jets scrambled into the sky, missile systems came online, and naval forces moved into strategic positions. But everyone knew that conventional weapons would be useless against technology capable of crossing interstellar space. The first alien vessel began its descent through Earth's atmosphere, its massive bulk creating sonic booms that shattered windows across 3 states. As it descended, it deployed smaller craft that spread out across the continent like a swarm of mechanical locusts. "Colonel," called out Sergeant Martinez from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission. It's in English." Sarah felt her blood freeze. "Put it through." The main speakers crackled with static before a voice came through, clearly artificial but understandable. "Inhabitants of the third planet. You will cease all resistance. Your biological matter will be harvested for the expansion of the collective. Resistance is futile." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. "Well," said General Harrison after a moment, "at least we know where we stand." But, as the first harvester ships began landing in major population centers, something unexpected happened. Instead of panic and chaos, cities around the world began implementing emergency protocols that had been developed in secret for decades. Underground bunkers opened, revealing stockpiles of weapons and equipment. Military units emerged from hidden facilities with technology that officially didn't exist. Sarah watched in amazement as reports flooded in from around the globe. In Russia, massive underground complexes were revealed to house advanced aircraft and weaponry. China unveiled energy weapons that had been developed in secret programs. The European Union activated a continental defense grid that had been disguised as a civilian communication network. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "How long have we been preparing for this?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Director James Crawford of an organization that officially didn't exist stepped into the command center, his security clearance apparently higher than anyone else in the room. Since 1952, he said simply. When we recovered our first crashed alien probe. We've known this day would come. We just didn't know when. Sarah stared at him. You're saying we've had alien technology for 70 years? We've had pieces. Fragments. Enough to know that we weren't alone, and that someday, something would come looking for us. Every major nation has been preparing in secret, developing weapons and defenses based on what little we could reverse engineer. On the screens around them, the first battles between human forces and the harvester ships began. What should have been a one-sided massacre quickly became something very different. The harvester ships were designed to face primitive civilizations with basic technology. They were not prepared for directed energy weapons, electromagnetic pulse devices, or kinetic bombardment systems that had been developed specifically to counter alien technology. Over New York, a squadron of fighters that looked like nothing in any official military inventory engaged the harvesters' escort craft. Their weapons fired beams of coherent energy that cut through alien hulls like paper. Over London, surface-to-air missile batteries revealed themselves to be energy cannons that had been disguised for decades. But the real surprise came from an unexpected source. As the harvester ships began deploying ground forces, they found themselves facing not just military resistance, but civilian populations that seemed impossibly well prepared for alien invasion. In Tokyo, office workers emerged from subway stations carrying weapons that had been stored in hidden caches throughout the city. In Berlin, construction crews revealed that half the building projects in the city had been covers for underground military installations. In Cairo, archaeologists turned out to be special forces soldiers guarding facilities hidden beneath ancient monuments. Sarah watched the feeds in growing amazement. How many people knew? More than you might think, Crawford replied. Farmers who were really guarding underground silos. Teachers who spent their summers at special training facilities. Mechanics who were maintaining equipment that officially didn't exist. We've spent 70 years turning our entire planet into a fortress, hiding our preparations in plain sight. The alien harvesters found themselves fighting not just armies, but an entire world that had been waiting for them. Every major city revealed hidden defenses. Every government facility turned out to have backup systems and secret capabilities. And, most shocking of all, the civilians themselves seemed to know exactly what to do. Reports flooded in from around the globe. In Australia, ranchers were deploying energy weapons from converted farm equipment. In Brazil, environmental activists revealed themselves to be special forces units that had been monitoring alien activities in the Amazon. In Antarctica, research stations dropped their covers and revealed advanced military installations. But, perhaps the most surprising revelation came from space itself. What the aliens had taken for primitive satellites turned out to be a comprehensive early warning and defense network. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as communication relays began firing on the alien ships with weapons technology that rivaled their own. "Colonel," called out Lieutenant Morrison, his voice filled with awe. "The International Space Station just transformed. It's not a research facility. It's a weapons platform." On the main display, they watched as the ISS deployed weapon arrays that had been hidden within its structure for decades. Similar transformations were occurring with satellites and space platforms around the globe. Humanity's space infrastructure revealed itself to be a carefully constructed defense grid. The harvester ships found themselves caught completely off guard. Their scanning had indicated a primitive civilization with basic technology. Instead, they were facing a coordinated planetary defense that had been 70 years in the making. But the real shock was yet to come. As the battle raged across Earth's surface and, in orbit, the damaged alien ships near Mars began receiving detailed tactical information. Someone on Earth was providing them with real-time intelligence about the harvester ship's weaknesses and capabilities. Admiral Zexthera watched in disbelief as her tactical displays filled with information that could only have come from detailed study of Void Reaper technology. Weapon frequencies, shield modulations, tactical patterns, even the location of critical systems within the harvester ships. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. They're offering us assistance." The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "Admiral Zexthera of the Coalition Fleet, this is General Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command. We have analyzed your tactical situation and are prepared to offer direct military support. Please advise if you are willing to coordinate our defensive efforts." Zexthera's jaw dropped. Not only did the primitive planet know her name and rank, they were speaking her language and offering military assistance. "How do you know our language?" she managed to ask. "We've been monitoring coalition communications for the past 30 years, Admiral. We know about the war with the Void Reapers. We know about the worlds they've destroyed. And we know that today, that ends." The confidence in the human voice was absolute, as if stating a simple fact rather than making a desperate boast. "General Chen," Zextera said slowly, "my scans indicate your people have only recently developed spaceflight. How can you possibly challenge the Void Reapers?" The reply came with what sounded distinctly like amusement. "Admiral, we've been preparing for this war since before we had spaceflight. We've been planning for this day since we first learned we weren't alone in the universe. Today, the Void Reapers learn what happens when they threaten Earth." And, as if summoned by those words, something new appeared on the tactical displays. Launch signatures erupted from across Earth's surface as thousands of missiles rose toward the Harvester fleet. But these weren't primitive chemical rockets. These were weapons that had been designed and built using 70 years of accumulated alien technology, refined and improved by human engineering. The war for Earth had truly begun, and, for the first time in the long conflict with the Void Reapers, Admiral Zextera allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, these strange humans might actually have a chance. The missiles that rose from Earth's surface were unlike anything Admiral Zextera had ever seen. They moved with impossible precision, their trajectories adjusting in real time as they tracked their targets. More disturbing to the Void Reapers, each missile seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Aboard the lead Harvester ship, the Void Reaper collective consciousness processed this new development with mechanical confusion. In their thousands of years of expansion, they had never encountered resistance like this. Primitive species fled or died. Advanced species fought with conventional tactics that could be analyzed and countered. But these humans were doing something unprecedented. They were learning and adapting faster than the Reapers could process. The first wave of human missiles struck the Harvester fleet with devastating effect. Energy shields that had withstood coalition weapons for years collapsed under the impact of weapons designed specifically to counter Void Reaper technology. Hull plating that had been forged from the resources of a dozen worlds cracked and shattered under kinetic impacts that struck with surgical precision. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Crindole from his tactical station, his compound eyes reflecting the explosions on his screens. "The humans are achieving a 97% hit rate. That's impossible against Reaper evasion systems." Zextera studied the battle data flowing across her displays. The humans weren't just hitting their targets, they were hitting them exactly where they would cause the most damage. Engine cores, weapon systems, command nodes, all struck with the kind of precision that suggested intimate knowledge of Void Reaper ship design. "General Chen," she transmitted to Earth's surface. "How do you know so precisely where to strike?" The response came immediately. "We've been studying every piece of Void Reaper technology we could get our hands on for decades, Admiral. Every probe, every scout ship, every fragment of debris from your battles with them. We know their ships better than they do." This was impossible, Zextera thought. The Coalition had been fighting the Reapers for generations and still struggled to predict their tactics. How could a primitive world have gained such detailed knowledge? The answer became clear as more reports flooded in from around the galaxy. Human signals were being detected throughout Coalition space, not just from Earth but from hidden observation posts scattered across dozens of star systems. The humans had been secretly monitoring the war for decades, collecting intelligence and preparing for this moment. On Earth's surface, the revelation of humanity's secret preparations continued to unfold. In the deep caves beneath the Rocky Mountains, massive manufacturing facilities had been producing advanced weapons and equipment for 40 years. In the Sahara Desert, what appeared to be solar collection facilities revealed themselves to be massive energy storage systems designed to power planetary defense grids. But the most shocking revelation came from the ocean floors. Submarine bases that had been disguised as deep-sea research stations began launching vessels that could only be described as human spacecraft. These ships, built using reverse-engineered alien technology and refined through decades of human innovation, rose from the depths and joined the battle in space. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez as she watched the feeds from around the world. "We haven't been hiding our preparations from the aliens. We've been hiding them from ourselves." Director Crawford nodded grimly. Compartmentalization. No one person knew the full scope of what we were building. Scientists thought they were working on theoretical projects. Engineers thought they were building prototypes that would never be used. Factory workers thought they were making components for classified military programs. But, how did you coordinate it all? Very carefully, and over a very long time. Every piece had to fit together perfectly when the day came, but no one could know they were building pieces of the same puzzle. Colonel Chen watched the orbital battle unfold on her screens, feeling a mixture of pride and terror. The human forces were performing better than even the most optimistic projections had suggested, but they were still facing technology that had conquered half the galaxy. The Void Reapers were adapting too. Their remaining ships began deploying countermeasures and adjusting their tactics. Energy weapons that had been ineffective against human shields suddenly modified their frequencies. Hull armor that had been vulnerable to human weapons began regenerating and adapting to resist further damage. They're learning, General Harrison observed. Just like we knew they would. Then, it's time for Phase 2, Chen replied. Across Earth's surface, new facilities revealed themselves. What had appeared to be normal cities and towns suddenly bristled with defensive systems that had been built into their very foundations. Skyscrapers revealed themselves to be massive weapon platforms. Subway systems opened to disgorge armies of soldiers equipped with technology that matched anything the aliens possessed. But the real surprise was the humans themselves. As Void Reaper ground forces landed in major population centers, they found themselves facing not panicking civilians, but entire populations that seemed to have been preparing for alien invasion their entire lives. In downtown Tokyo, office workers emerged from buildings carrying advanced energy weapons and moving with military precision. In London, construction crews revealed that every major building project in the past 20 years had included hidden defensive systems. In New York, taxi drivers and hot dog vendors turned out to be highly trained special operations forces who had been living under cover identities for decades. The Void Reapers had expected to harvest a world of primitives. Instead, they found themselves fighting an entire planet where every citizen seemed to be a potential soldier, every building was a potential fortress, and every piece of civilian infrastructure was actually part of a vast military machine. Admiral Zexthera watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. General Chen, how many of your people are actually military personnel? All of them, Admiral, came the reply. Every human on Earth has been trained for this day. Some knew it, some didn't, but everyone was prepared. The scope of what the humans had accomplished began to sink in. They hadn't just built weapons and defenses, they had turned their entire civilization into a military force while maintaining the appearance of a normal, peaceful society. The farmers who grew our food also maintained underground weapon caches. The teachers who educated our children also trained them in basic military tactics disguised as games and sports. The doctors who healed our sick also learned how to treat injuries from energy weapons. For 70 years, every aspect of human society has been dual purpose. On the Coalition ships, alien crew members watched in stunned silence as reports continued to pour in. Human forces were not just holding their ground against the Void Reapers, they were actually pushing them back. For the first time in the Long War, the mechanical plague was being not just resisted, but defeated. But the humans weren't finished surprising them. As the battle raged, new ships began emerging from hidden facilities across the solar system. Asteroid mining operations revealed themselves to be shipyards that had been building a secret fleet for decades. What had appeared to be scientific missions to the outer planets turned out to be military outposts establishing defensive positions throughout the solar system. Admiral called Communications Officer Velterra, her tentacles dancing across her control surfaces in agitation. I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout this star system. The humans have been building infrastructure on every major celestial body. The tactical display updated to show the true scope of humanity's preparations. Mars revealed massive underground complexes that had been disguised as terraforming projects. The asteroid belt contained hidden weapons platforms and manufacturing facilities. Even the gas giant's moon showed signs of extensive military installations. They've turned their entire star system into a fortress, Zexthera whispered. This wasn't first contact. This was a trap. The realization struck her like a physical blow. The humans had known the Void Reapers would come eventually. They had spent decades preparing not just to defend their world, but to destroy any force that threatened it. And now that force was trapped in a star system that had become one massive weapon. General Chen's voice came through the communications channel, and, this time there was no mistaking the steel beneath the diplomatic tone. Admiral Zexthera, we're transmitting tactical data to assist your forces. But, I want you to understand something. The Void Reapers made a mistake when they decided to threaten Earth. They're not just fighting us. They're fighting an entire species that has spent 70 years learning how to kill them. As if to emphasize her point, new weapon systems activated throughout the solar system. Energy beams that had been carefully aimed for optimal effect began firing from positions throughout the asteroid belt. The Void Reaper fleet found themselves caught in a crossfire that had been decades in the planning. But, the most devastating weapon was yet to be revealed. From Earth's moon, a facility that had been disguised as a scientific research station began powering up systems that defied known physics. The energy readings were unlike anything the Coalition had ever detected, even from Void Reaper technology. What is that? Admiral Zexthera asked, staring at the readings from Luna. That, replied General Chen with evident satisfaction, is what happens when humans spend 70 years improving on alien technology. We call it the Planetary Defense Array. It was built specifically to end this war. The moon-based weapon fired once. A beam of energy unlike anything ever seen in galactic warfare reached across space and struck the largest Void Reaper harvester ship. The vessel, which had withstood concentrated fire from 3 Coalition fleets, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris, no energy signature. One moment the ship was there, the next it was gone, as if it had been carefully edited out of reality itself. In the sudden silence that followed, Admiral Zexthera realized that everything had changed. The humans hadn't just prepared to defend themselves. They had prepared to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. And, looking at her tactical displays, watching human forces systematically dismantle a Void Reaper fleet that had been considered invincible, she began to understand that the war was about to take a very different turn. The destruction of the lead Void Reaper harvester sent shockwaves through both fleets. For the Coalition forces, it was the first time they had seen such a complete annihilation of a Reaper vessel. For the Void Reapers themselves, it represented something their collective consciousness had never experienced: true fear. The remaining 11 harvester ships immediately altered their tactics, abandoning their systematic approach to planetary consumption in favor of desperate survival maneuvers. They began deploying every weapon system and defensive countermeasure in their arsenal, filling space around Earth with energy blasts and seeking to overwhelm the human defenses through sheer firepower. But, the humans had anticipated this response too. Activating Umbrella Protocol, General Chen announced calmly from her command center deep beneath the Colorado Mountains. Around Earth, thousands of previously hidden installations revealed their true purpose. Satellite arrays that had been disguised as communication networks suddenly projected energy shields around the planet. Underground facilities launched defensive drones by the millions, creating a protective swarm around Earth's orbital space. Even civilian aircraft revealed themselves to be armed with advanced weapons systems as they joined the planetary defense grid. Admiral Zexthera watched in amazement as Earth transformed before her eyes from a single world into what could only be described as a fortress planet. Every piece of human infrastructure, from orbital stations to ground-based installations, was revealing military capabilities that had been hidden for decades. Admiral, called Lieutenant Crindole, his voice filled with awe, their defensive grid is generating energy readings equivalent to a Coalition star fortress. How did they build all this without anyone noticing? The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Mordak of the damaged Pathfinder had been monitoring human communications since the battle began, and his analysis was disturbing. Admiral, his voice crackled through the communications array, I've been analyzing their technological progression. These humans didn't just reverse engineer our technology or Void Reaper systems. They improved on them. Significantly. Zexthera felt a chill run down her spine. Explain. Their energy weapons show 30% greater efficiency than standard Coalition designs. Their shield technology appears to be at least 2 generations ahead of our current systems. And, that weapon they fired from their moon. Admiral, that's technology we've never seen before. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not only been secretly preparing for this war, they had been advancing technologically at a rate that defied known patterns of scientific development. In 70 years, they had gone from a pre-spaceflight civilization to possessing weapons that could destroy Void Reaper ships with a single shot. General Chen, Admiral Zexthera transmitted to Earth, how is this possible? How did your species advance so quickly? The human commander's response carried a note of something that might have been pride. "Admiral, you have to understand something about humans. We're very good at learning from our enemies. Every Void Reaper probe that entered our system, every piece of debris from their battles with your fleets, every fragment of technology we could recover, we studied it, improved it, and built something better. But technological advancement takes time, resources, proper scientific infrastructure. Which we've had for 70 years, Admiral. 70 years of every human scientist, engineer, and inventor working together toward a single goal. We didn't just prepare for this war, we revolutionized our entire approach to technology development." As if to demonstrate this point, new human ships began emerging from hidden facilities throughout the solar system. Unlike the converted civilian vessels that had first appeared, these were purpose-built warships that incorporated the best of human innovation and alien technology. They moved through space with a grace and efficiency that surpassed even coalition designs, their weapon systems cycling through frequencies and targeting protocols that seemed to anticipate Void Reaper defensive measures. The human fleet took formation around Earth with military precision that spoke of decades of training and preparation. Each ship was unique, representing different approaches to the same technological challenges, but they moved together as if controlled by a single mind. "Admiral," called Commander Raxith from the security station, "the humans are requesting permission to coordinate our tactical systems with theirs." Zexthara hesitated. Sharing tactical data with an unknown species was unprecedented and potentially dangerous. But watching the human forces systematically dismantle Void Reaper ships that had terrorized the galaxy for generations, she realized that conventional thinking might not apply to these remarkable beings. "Grant them access to our tactical networks," she ordered. "Limited access only, but let them coordinate with our weapons systems." The moment the connection was established, the effectiveness of the coalition fleet increased dramatically. Human tactical analysis began appearing on their screens, providing targeting solutions and strategic recommendations that their own computers had missed. More importantly, the humans began sharing real-time intelligence about Void Reaper vulnerabilities that the coalition had never discovered. "Admiral," Lieutenant Crindle called out excitedly, "they're showing us weak points in the Reaper hull designs that we never knew existed. Their analysis suggests we've been targeting the wrong systems all along." Following human guidance, the coalition ships redirected their weapons toward previously ignored sections of the Void Reaper hulls. The results were immediate and devastating. Ships that had seemed nearly indestructible began showing critical damage from weapons that had previously barely scratched their armor. But the humans were preparing something even more ambitious. Throughout the solar system, the massive installations on various celestial bodies began aligning their position relative to the Void Reaper fleet. Energy readings spiked across the entire system as power sources that had been building charge for decades began connecting to form a single, coordinated network. "General Chen," Admiral Zexthara transmitted, "what are you preparing?" "The final solution, Admiral," came the calm reply. "We call it the solar web. Every installation, every hidden facility, every piece of infrastructure we've built in this system for the past 70 years, all connected together into a single weapon system." The scope of what the humans had accomplished began to truly sink in. They hadn't just built defenses or prepared weapons. They had turned their entire star system into one massive military installation, with every planet, moon, and asteroid serving as components in a weapon of unimaginable power. On the Void Reaper ships, the collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented in their existence, the recognition that they had made a critical error. These humans were not the primitive species their scans had indicated. They were something far more dangerous, a civilization that had spent generations preparing specifically to destroy them. The mechanical entities began attempting to retreat, their ships turning away from Earth and trying to reach the edge of the solar system. But it was too late. The solar web was already activating, and there was nowhere in the system they could go that wasn't within range of the massive weapon network. "All coalition ships, move to minimum safe distance," General Chen's voice carried across the communications channels. "Solar web firing in 60 seconds. Admiral Zexthara ordered her fleet to retreat to the edge of the system, watching as the human installations aligned themselves with mechanical precision. Energy readings throughout the solar system spiked to levels that should have been impossible to achieve or control. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez's voice came through from Earth's surface, "you should know something about us. Humans don't just fight wars to win them. We fight wars to make sure they never happen again." The solar web fired. Energy beams from hundreds of installations throughout the system converged on the fleeing Void Reaper ships. But this wasn't just concentrated firepower, it was something far more sophisticated. The beams didn't simply destroy their targets, they seemed to unravel them at a fundamental level, breaking down the very matter that composed the ships and converting it into pure energy. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Void Reaper fleet ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated, but completely and utterly annihilated as if they had never been there at all. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in generations, space around Earth was completely clear of Void Reaper presence. Admiral Zextera, General Chen's voice broke the silence. The immediate threat to your fleet has been eliminated. We're prepared to extend our assistance to help you repair your ships and treat your wounded. But Zextera was already thinking beyond the immediate battle. If humans could do this to a Void Reaper fleet, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? What did it mean for the Coalition? What did it mean for every species that had lived in terror of the mechanical plague? General Chen, she said slowly, I think we need to discuss the future of this war. And the future of the galaxy. We're ready for that conversation, Admiral, came the reply. But first, let us help you save your people. After that, we can talk about saving everyone else's. As Coalition medical and engineering teams prepared to receive human assistance, Admiral Zextera realized that everything had changed. The war that had seemed hopeless just hours before now had a very different outlook. And, at the center of that change was a species that had spent 70 years preparing to prove that some threats to civilization should not be tolerated. 6 months after the Battle of Seoul, as historians would later call it, the galactic political landscape had fundamentally changed. Admiral Zextera stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran Embassy Station, watching as human ships moved through space with a confidence that had become the new normal in Coalition territory. The aftermath of humanity's victory over the Void Reapers had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Within weeks of the battle, every major civilization had requested diplomatic contact with Earth. Some came seeking alliance, others hoping to understand how a previously unknown species had accomplished what the combined might of the Coalition had failed to do for generations. Admiral, came the familiar voice of General Chen, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, the Security Council is ready for your briefing. Zextera turned from the viewport, noting how much had changed since their first desperate encounter. The Coalition had not just survived the war against the Void Reapers, it had emerged stronger than ever, thanks to an alliance that no one could have predicted. General, I still find it difficult to believe how much has changed in such a short time. Chen smiled, a human expression that Zextera had learned to interpret as friendly amusement. Change tends to accelerate when an existential threat is removed, Admiral. People can finally focus on building instead of just surviving. They walked through corridors lined with displays showing the progress of the Joint Human Coalition task force that was systematically hunting down the remaining Void Reaper installations throughout the galaxy. The efficiency of the operations was remarkable, combining human technological innovation with Coalition knowledge of galactic geography and politics. The Security Council chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all gathered to hear the latest reports on what was being called the Great Liberation. For the first time in centuries, star systems were being freed from Void Reaper occupation, and worlds that had been stripped of life were being restored using human terraforming technology. Members of the Council, Admiral Zextera began her presentation. I'm pleased to report that the Joint Task Force has successfully eliminated Void Reaper presence from the Kepler sector. 7 star systems have been liberated, and restoration efforts are already underway. The chamber erupted in excited chatter from representatives of species whose homeworlds had been in that sector. After generations of believing their worlds were lost forever, they were learning that human technology could actually reverse the damage the Reapers had done. Councillor Vexthal, a representative of the ancient hegemony worlds, raised a crystalline appendage. Admiral, what can you tell us about the human restoration process? Our scientists are struggling to understand how they're achieving these results. Zextera looked to General Chen, who stood to address the council. Counselor, the restoration process combines several human innovations. We've developed bioregeneration technology that can rebuild planetary ecosystems from trace genetic material. Our atmospheric processors can restore breathable atmospheres in months rather than centuries. And our soil regeneration systems can make stripped worlds fertile again. But how? Pressed another counselor. The Reapers don't just strip life, they consume the very matter that supports it. We learned to work with what remained, Chen replied. Every Void Reaper harvest left traces, fragments of what had been there before. Human biotechnology specializes in taking those fragments and rebuilding complete ecosystems. We've spent 70 years learning how to bring dead worlds back to life. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just developed weapons to fight the Reapers, they had developed the tools to undo the damage the mechanical plague had inflicted across the galaxy. Worlds that had been considered permanently lost could be restored to their original states. But, perhaps more important than the technology was what humanity had brought to galactic civilization itself. The Coalition had been a defensive alliance, focused on survival and damage control. Under human influence, it was becoming something far more ambitious, a force for active restoration and expansion. Admiral, called Counselor Morthek of the Frontier Worlds, what's the status of the new shipyard construction? Ahead of schedule, Zextera replied with satisfaction. The humans have introduced manufacturing techniques that are revolutionizing our approach to ship construction. The new combined fleet will be 3 times larger than anything the Coalition has previously fielded, and each ship will incorporate the best of both human and traditional Coalition technology. The joint shipyards were perhaps the most visible symbol of the new alliance. Human engineering combined with Coalition resources and experience had resulted in vessels that surpassed anything previously conceived. More importantly, these ships were designed not just for warfare, but for exploration, research, and the peaceful expansion of civilization. There is another matter we need to discuss, General Chen said, her tone becoming more serious. We've detected something in the deep galactic core that requires investigation. The chamber fell silent. The galactic core was largely unexplored, considered too dangerous for standard Coalition vessels due to the intense radiation and gravitational anomalies. Our long-range sensors have detected what appear to be massive artificial structures in the core region, Chen continued. Based on the energy signatures, we believe they may be the original Void Reaper construction facilities. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If the Reapers had been built rather than evolved, then, somewhere in the galaxy's core was the civilization responsible for creating the mechanical plague that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Admiral Zextera asked carefully, are you suggesting that the Void Reapers were weapons created by another species? That's exactly what we're suggesting, Admiral. And, if we're right, then, the war isn't over. We've just been fighting the symptoms, not the cause. The revelation sent a wave of concerned discussion through the chamber. If there was a creator species behind the Void Reapers, they represented a threat far greater than anything the galaxy had previously faced. However, Chen continued, raising her voice to quiet the chamber, humanity didn't reveal this information to frighten you. We revealed it because we believe we're finally strong enough to do something about it. She activated a holographic display showing human ship designs that dwarfed anything currently in existence. These are the specifications for our deep core exploration vessels. Ships capable of surviving the journey to the galactic center and investigating these structures. But we won't be going alone. The display shifted to show a combined fleet of unprecedented size, incorporating ships from every Coalition member species alongside human vessels. This will be a joint expedition, representing every free civilization in the galaxy. If there is a creator species out there, they'll learn that the galaxy is no longer defenseless. Admiral Zextera felt a stirring of something she hadn't experienced since her youth, genuine optimism about the future. The Coalition had always been reactive, responding to threats after they appeared. But humanity had brought a different philosophy, one of active problem-solving and long-term planning. When do we depart? Asked Counselor Vexthal. The expedition fleet will be ready in 18 months, Chen replied. But, understand, this isn't just a military mission. We're going to the core to ensure that nothing like the Void Reapers can ever be unleashed on the galaxy again. As the meeting concluded and representatives began discussing the logistics of the greatest expedition in galactic history, Admiral Zextera found herself reflecting on the changes of the past months. The humans had not just saved the galaxy from the Void Reapers. They had given it something it hadn't possessed for centuries, hope for a future where civilizations could grow and prosper without fear of annihilation. They had transformed the Coalition from a desperate alliance of survivors into a force capable of confronting any threat the galaxy might contain. But, perhaps most importantly, they had proven that some species possessed not just the ability to survive in a hostile universe, but the determination to make it better. As she watched human and Coalition ships working together in the shipyards outside the station, Admiral Zextera realized that the age of merely surviving in the galaxy was coming to an end. Thanks to Earth's deadly natives, the age of reclaiming it was about to begin. the galaxy would never be the same. And, for the first time in her long military career, Admiral Zexthera was absolutely certain that was a good thing. Looking toward the galactic core, where humanity's next challenge awaited, she found herself eager to see what other impossible things these remarkable beings would accomplish. After all, they had already proven that when someone threatened their world, the consequences would be swift, decisive, and absolute. The Void Reapers had requested backup by invading Earth. Instead, they had faced humanity's complete and total response. Now it was time to ensure that whatever had created them would face the same fate. The war for the galaxy's future was just beginning, and, this time, humanity would not be fighting alone.